Charlotte, how much is enough? We're giving more than any of the other countries, obviously not America, but they're a lot bigger than us. I think it's 2.6 billion, I think.
I think we should give as much as it takes. You know, this was, as you introduced it at the top of the hour, this was an unprovoked invasion of a sovereign nation. And if you believe in self-determination, if you believe in sovereignty, then you have to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine. And whether that's providing humanitarian support, whether it's providing, obviously the topic of conversation at the moment is jets, you know, tanks, missile systems. Of course we should do this, because if we don't, and if we allow Russia to continue, which is a much larger country with far more people, they can just keep, you know, pushing into Ukraine, then what is the message we're sending? That actually the world accepts that it's OK for a rogue nation to suddenly decide they'd like to annex another?
I mean, some would argue, and I mean, I say it's unprovoked, but some would argue that it was provoked because apparently NATO encroached on Russia's borders, which we apparently promised not to do. But then if you look at the Budapest Memorandum, which said that Russia would support Ukraine and told it to disarm and lose its, get rid of its nuclear weapons, I don't really think that's much of an argument. Paul, what do you think?
What concerns me, Nana, is we often hear today, particularly from leaders in the West, the argument for more war. I'm not hearing a lot of people with influence making the case for peace, and that really concerns me. I mean, I think we're in dangerous territory, actually, and I think some people probably don't realise how dangerous it is. Wars have got this habit of escalating beyond our control, almost before we've looked round and realised it. You only have to look back in history. Look at the First World War, for example. What happened in Sarajevo in 1914? All of a sudden, a tinderbox, and bang, you've got a major conflagration across the whole of Europe. And when you've got a situation where Putin, who is a complete tyrant, there's no question about that, but he gives a speech a couple of days ago talking about withdrawing Russia from a nuclear treaty. And almost at the same time, you've got Biden standing in Poland, a former Eastern Bloc country, sabre-rattling, talking up the case for war, then it strikes me that actually you're in a pretty serious situation. And I think it's striking, actually, the only country really with influence that has actually laid down a proposal for peace is China. Now, I've got no particular love whatsoever for the Chinese regime, but you know they've made this 12-point plan, and people can say it's good, bad, indifferent, or whatever. But at least they're making an effort to say, look, how can we bring about a ceasefire? How can we bring the two sides together? And that might not be possible. It might be that Putin or Zelensky or whoever says, no, we're not interested in that. What concerns me is that nobody else seems to be trying at the moment.
Do you think it maybe comes from a distrust of Vladimir Putin? Because he's talked about ceasefires and they weren't ceasefires. And, you know, Ukrainians got killed in the so-called ceasefires. Do you remember those at the beginning when they were supposed to be making peaceful passages where people could pass from one place to the other in safety? Civilians. And he didn't really give two hoots about that. So do you think that, you know, China, as you said, have been very, I would say, good in this? And I suspected as much that would be the case, because there are a couple of things that they've actually refused to blame Russia. They've actually, you know, they're not prepared to back Russia, but they're not prepared to blame them either. Yeah. They're not prepared to blame them.
By the way, Nana, I don't think you can necessarily... If you're going to intervene in a serious conflict as a nation and put down peace proposals, then, frankly, you can't start apportioning blame when you make that announcement, you know, because if you do, then the peace proposals are dead in the water. You know, if they were to attack Russia at the same time as saying, also, can we bring peace, then it would be pointless.
Behind the scenes be supporting Russia as well. And it's ludicrous to say that you can't blame Russia. Russia literally invaded a sovereign nation. There is no two ways about that. And, you know, if the Americans' intelligence at the moment is correct, there is a strong suggestion that China are about to provide weapons to Russia.
But that's not what they've said. No, that's not what they've said. I mean, they've even said...
We could have a discussion about whether we trust China, right? And their very, very long history of saying things and then doing things that are very, very different. China, it is in China's interest to back Russia because geopolitics demands it.
Well, can I just stop you on that? Because I don't know whether it is. Because if you think about it, China is literally the global supplier of the world. China makes a lot of money out of selling us all things. So it doesn't really want to be relying on just one source. And Russia doesn't want to... If it goes that way, then we might end up isolating China as well. So China is looking at the bigger picture. Why would it support Russia? It's quite clearly said that actually we don't want nuclear weapons, we don't want a nuclear conflict, because I think they are wise enough to see that nobody wins.
Well, actually, when you look at the 12-point proposal that they made, I think there's very little that any reasonable person could disagree with. Now, you might say it's pie in the sky, you might say Putin won't be interested, and that's fine. But what I would say is at least the Chinese government, for all its very, very many faults, is kind of grasping the nettle and saying, look, how can we bring about a ceasefire? How can we bring about a negotiated settlement? And it just seems to me that whenever there's another conflict elsewhere in the world, a serious conflict, then the West, Britain and America, if they're not directly involved, then they're very quick to say, look, we need to get involved to bring about a ceasefire, see if we can negotiate broker a peaceful settlement. All well and good. However, with this conflict, it just seems that there are so few voices doing that, and that concerns me. And of course, China, to a degree, is going to act in its own geopolitical interests, just frankly as we're acting in our geopolitical interests in backing Ukraine to the hill, as is America. But sooner or later, I think we've got to realise that this war is not necessarily going to end anytime soon. I don't think Ukraine is going to be beaten anytime soon, neither is Russia. So we run the risk, unless there are people bringing about proposals for a peaceful settlement, we run the risk of this dragging on for months and years and thousands more people being slaughtered.
Under your idea, and I mean, obviously, I don't want to see Ukrainians slaughtered. I don't want to see the war going on. I want it to end. Yeah. But under your idea that we should carry on and carry on and carry on, this doesn't end.
So if another nation invaded Britain, would we be sitting here having that conversation and saying, actually, you know what? Yeah, obviously Britain was sovereign.
But let's stick to Ukraine.
No, because I don't think you can.
No, I think you should.
Because actually, the argument here is that this was an independent country that was living perfectly peacefully, as you said, respecting the agreement that had been made with Russia. Actually, in terms of whether other nations have tried to avert war, come to some type of settlement, I'm sure we all remember the various leaders of the different European countries traipsing over to Russia, trying to negotiate, trying to get, avoid the invasion. But ultimately, Putin took the decision to invade a country, and let's be clear about the type of war we're talking about as well, using rape, using mass murder, using torture, deliberately targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure, which is illegal in war. These are war crimes.
The whole thing.
And yet we are sitting here saying, maybe we can come to a negotiation. Well, the only negotiated, quotes, peace here is either giving Russia part of Ukraine or somehow...
But do we know that, though, Charlie? Because, I mean, the truth is, I don't think we've really tried anything else. I mean, if you look at the Minsk Accords, for example, which some years ago were designed to bring about a lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia. On the one hand, guaranteeing the territorial sovereignty of Ukraine, but at the same time recognising that there needs to be some degree of autonomy for the ethnic Russians in the Donbass region in the east. If we were to make every effort, strain every sinew as an international community to try to resurrect those accords, for example, then it may well be that they can form the basis of a negotiated settlement. And it may be a long, complex procedure. Some people said before there was the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland in 1998, or whenever it was, that will never be achieved. You've got two warring communities, it will never be achieved. But I think if you apply yourself as an international community, you don't know what might happen. Now, it may well be that Putin doesn't grasp that nettle and says, no, I'm in this for the long haul, this is all-out war, in which case, fine, but... You then have to challenge him.
Didn't involve any annexation of another nation, though, right? It was a peace agreement, but actually you still have Ireland and Northern Ireland. So what we had in 2014 was an annexation of another part of a country.
No, but I mean,
not in a democratic way, not by a self-determination process.
Of course, but the Republicans in Northern Ireland would say the same thing, that Northern Ireland was annexed, but they still can't.
Absolutely. I just say that basically it's a totally different situation, so we have to take each one individually. And with regard to the sort of earlier mention that, imagine that you're the one in there, I actually think that people make better decisions when they don't imagine they're the ones in there. So it's better for us to not be in there, because it's like giving great advice when you're not the one involved. So that's why I'm saying that as an overseer, China actually coming up with some good ideas, and I would really like to see this war stop. And I think that actually giving more and more weapons, we have to somehow protect the Ukrainians, but I'm just not seeing that ends in a peaceful manner. I'm concerned that too many people will die.
And look, we've already seen tens and tens of thousands of civilians die in this war, and that's before you even think about what is about guess of about 200,000 Russians, many of whom won't have wanted to have been part of an invasion and going in and being part of that war. So of course we don't want to see more death. Of course we don't. But I really don't think it's our place to stand back and say, but actually, do you know what, Ukraine, we're going to therefore tell you what you should do.
No, I'm not saying that. I think that, as Paul is saying, the world needs to get together and say, look, we're going to stop this.
But the Ukrainians are very clear. They don't trust Putin.
I think you can take both positions without necessarily being inconsistent. I think on the one hand you can say, look, Putin's invasion was an absolute violation of international law, completely indefensible, as is any invasion of a sovereign territory, unless you yourself are somehow being threatened. And that as a result of that, you've got to defend Ukraine's territorial sovereignty and show them solidarity. But at the same time, as making the case for the defence of Ukraine, you've got to be having one eye on, look, how are we going to bring about a lasting settlement to this situation? You need peace brokers in that situation. And it just seems to me we just don't have any in the international community who are willing to broker that peace. And I think that's really worrying.
Well, let's have a look at what everyone's been saying, because Mark made a comment with regard to you, Paul, actually. He said, Paul curiously made reference to World War I, but ignored World War II, where we sat on our hands and appeased Hitler. Millions still died. We need to do whatever is necessary to defeat Russia and put Putin back in his box. The alternative would definitely be World War III. That's if we're not already in it. Mel says, I'm a working person and I would sooner help Ukraine than give money to people on benefits. Our country needs an overhaul, get people doing voluntary work for their benefits. Yeah, OK, I hear you. I wouldn't disagree with that. Leslie says we must continue to supply Ukraine for as long as they need us. The Ukrainian military are fighting for us all. Yeah. If anyone thinks the Russian madman would stop at Ukraine, then they're mad. History says otherwise. Yeah, very true. And Wayne says the West has been meddling in Ukraine for the last 20 years and are willing to fight until the last Ukrainian has died. All this didn't need to happen. All are guilty. I'm kind of with him that all are guilty, but still Putin
I think he's got a legitimate point. There's been a chronic lack of historical perspective in much of the debate about Ukraine. As I said before, you can on the one hand say, look, it's completely wrong what Putin did. It's a violation of international law. But at the same time, I think it's important to have a historical perspective. This war didn't actually start a year ago, if we're honest about it. This war, in effect, started several years ago.
Yeah,
you can talk about the overthrow of the Yanukovych government, for example, which the West supported and stuff like that. But we don't seem to be looking at the history of it.
Well.